Hayes Thornton stood in the rain outside Rosie's diner at 2 in the morning, his $1,000 suit soaked through, and watched the woman who would destroy his carefully constructed world. She moved through the fluorescent lit space like liquid grace, refilling coffee cups, balancing plates along her forearm, laughing at something the cook said through the kitchen window. Her uniform was faded, the hem frayed at the edges, but she wore it with a dignity that made his chest tighten in ways he didn't recognize. 30 years. 30 years of iron control. 30 years of turning away from every woman who tried to breach his walls. 30 years of building an empire that demanded his complete focus, his absolute discipline, and it was about to shatter in the next 30 seconds. Hello, beautiful souls. Where are you watching from? If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now. You won't want to miss what happens next. Hayes's hand trembled as he reached for the diner door. The tremor shocked him more than the rain soaking into his Italian leather shoes. He was Hayes Thornton, CEO of Thornton Global Industries, the man who turned his father's failing real estate company into a $15 billion empire. He didn't tremble. He didn't hesitate. But Keisha Washington made him do both. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped inside. The warmth hit him first, the smell of coffee and pie, and something indefinably comforting that reminded him of a childhood he'd spent decades trying to forget. Then her eyes found his. Dark brown, impossibly deep, guarded but kind. "We're about to close, but take any seat you'd like," she said, her voice carrying a slight rasp that suggested too many late shifts and not enough sleep. "Coffee?" "Please." His own voice came out rougher than intended. She moved toward him with a coffee pot, and he noticed everything. The way she favored her left foot slightly, probably from standing all night. The small scar above her right eyebrow, the absence of rings on her fingers. The exhaustion she tried to hide behind a professional smile. "Rough night?" she asked, pouring his coffee with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "You could say that." He wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the heat ground him. "You work every night." "Most nights." She set the pot down, studying him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You don't look like our usual 2 a.m. crowd." "What does your usual crowd look like?" "Not like they just walked out of a Fortune 500 boardroom." A hint of amusement flickered in her eyes. "Though usually they're not soaking wet." Hayes glanced down at his ruined suit and felt something unfamiliar tug at his mouth. A smile. When was the last time he genuinely smiled? "I was thinking. Lost track of time." Must have been some serious thinking to stand in the rain for. She paused, tilting her head. "How long were you out there?" His heart stopped. She'd seen him, watching her, like some obsessed stalker instead of a man who prided himself on control and rationality. "I wasn't." He stopped, because lying to her felt impossible. "I was trying to decide if I should come in." "Why wouldn't you?" She leaned against the counter, and he caught a whiff of vanilla and something uniquely her. "It's just a diner." "Because you're in here," he thought. "Because I saw you 3 weeks ago when my driver took a wrong turn, and I haven't been able to focus on anything since. Because I've driven past this diner every night for 21 days, telling myself I wouldn't stop, wouldn't disrupt your life, wouldn't let myself want something, someone I have no right to want." "Just needed coffee," he said instead. She didn't believe him. He could see it in the slight narrowing of her eyes, the way her fingers drummed once against the counter. But she didn't push. "Well, you've got it." She turned to walk away. Wait. The word came out sharper than intended, almost desperate. She stopped, looking back over her shoulder. What's your name? Keisha. She studied him for a long moment. And you are? Hayes. Just Hayes. Just Hayes. He couldn't tell her his last name. Not yet. Not when the Thornton name came with $15 billion of expectations and a family that would eat someone like her alive. All right, just Hayes. That almost smile again. You want anything to eat, or are you just here for the ambiance? What do you recommend? The pie. Lemon meringue. I made it myself. You bake too. When the night baker doesn't show up, yeah. She shrugged, but he caught the pride underneath. I do what needs doing. He'd built an empire on that exact philosophy. But when she said it, it meant something different. Something about survival and strength, and a kind of resilience he'd forgotten existed. Then I'll have the pie. She brought it to him 3 minutes later, and when she set the plate down, her fingers brushed his. The contact lasted maybe half a second, but electricity shot up his arm and lodged somewhere behind his ribs. She felt it too. He saw her breath catch, saw her pupils dilate slightly before she stepped back. Enjoy, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. Hayes took a bite of the pie. It was perfect, tart and sweet, and made with the kind of care that couldn't be faked. This is incredible, he said honestly. Thanks. She glanced toward the kitchen. I should... Keisha. He didn't know what he was doing. Didn't know what he'd say. Only knew he couldn't let her walk away. Do you believe in fate? She froze, something flickering across her face too quickly to identify. Why? Because I think I was meant to find this place. Meant to find you. You don't know me. No. He held her gaze. But I'd like to. For a moment, something softened in her expression. Something vulnerable and hopeful, and terrified all at once. Then the walls slammed back into place. I'm nobody, just Hayes. Trust me, you don't want to know me. She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the kitchen. But Hayes sat there in the empty diner, his untouched pie growing cold, and knew with absolute certainty that his carefully controlled life had just been irrevocably altered. Because Keisha Washington was wrong about one thing. He absolutely wanted to know her, and Hayes Thornton always got what he wanted. But she had no idea what he was hiding, or that their meeting wasn't nearly as random as it seemed. Keisha Washington had learned 3 things by the age of 24. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Kindness cost nothing but meant everything, and men in expensive suits always wanted something. So when Hayes Thornton walked back into Rosie's diner the next night at exactly 2 a.m., she knew she should have turned him away. Instead, she poured his coffee without being asked and pretended her hands weren't shaking. You came back, she said, setting the mug in front of him. I said I would. He hadn't actually said that, but the certainty in his voice made it feel like a promise he'd been carrying all day. Most people don't keep promises to diner waitresses. I'm not most people. The way he said it, not arrogant, just factual, made something flutter dangerously in her chest. Keisha had spent 6 years working 3 jobs to pay off her mother's medical bills. Another 2 years saving every penny to help her younger sister through community college. And the last 8 months trying to forget that she'd once dreamed of more than survival. She'd gotten good at not wanting things, good at not hoping. But Hayes looked at her like she was the only person in the world, and hope was a treacherous thing. Why are you really here? She asked, crossing her arms. The coffee's terrible, and the neighborhood's worse. The coffee's perfect because you made it. He took a sip, never breaking eye contact, and I don't care about the neighborhood. You should. Your car probably costs more than this entire building. She'd seen the black Mercedes parked outside, had watched through the window as he'd sat in it for 10 minutes before coming in, like he was gathering courage for something. "It's just a car," said like someone who's never had to choose between gas money and groceries. The words came out sharper than intended, and she immediately regretted them. She didn't know this man, didn't know his story. But Hayes didn't flinch. If anything, something painful flickered across his face. "You're right. I haven't had to make that choice in a long time." The admission surprised her. Most wealthy men she'd encountered, the ones who came slumming in diners at odd hours, looking for something they couldn't name, would have gotten defensive or condescending. Hayes just looked sad. "But I remember what it's like," he continued quietly. "My mother worked 3 jobs too. I wore the same pair of shoes for 2 years because we couldn't afford new ones. I know what it means to be hungry and tired and invisible." Keisha's defenses cracked slightly. "What happened?" "She got sick. Cancer. I was 17. His jaw tightened. I couldn't save her. But I swore I'd never be powerless like that again." "So you became powerful. So I became ruthless." The honesty in those 3 words stole her breath. Most men would have dressed it up, made themselves sound noble. Hayes just laid the truth bare. "And now?" she asked. "Now I'm sitting in a diner at 2 in the morning, talking to a woman who makes me want to be something other than ruthless." The vulnerability in his voice made her want to run and stay in equal measure. "You don't know me well enough to want anything. Then let me know you." He leaned forward, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with rain. "Have coffee with me." "Not here. Somewhere you're not working." "I'm always working." "Then let me take you to breakfast after your shift ends." "Why?" The question came out almost pleading. "Why me? You could have anyone." "Because you're kind." He said it like it was the most important thing in the world. "I watched you last night. You gave extra pie to the homeless man who came in. You listened to the elderly woman talk about her dead husband for 20 minutes, even though you were exhausted. You treated everyone with the same dignity, whether they tipped you or not. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Keisha felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "Kindness doesn't pay bills." "No, but it's worth more than money." He reached across the counter, stopping just short of touching her hand. "I've spent 15 years building an empire. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and I would trade all of it to have what you have. That ability to see people, really see them, and care anyway. You're romanticizing poverty. I'm recognizing strength." His voice dropped lower. "You think I don't see how tired you are? How your feet hurt? How you're probably running on 4 hours of sleep and instant coffee? But you're still here, still smiling, still making lemon meringue pie at midnight because the baker didn't show up. That's not weakness, Keisha. That's power." Nobody had ever called her powerful before. The word settled into her bones like warmth. "One breakfast," she heard herself say. "Just breakfast. And you pay because I'm not pretending this is equal." "Deal." His smile transformed his entire face, making him look younger, less guarded. "Tomorrow morning, I'll pick you up here at 7. I'll meet you somewhere." She wasn't getting into cars with strange men, no matter how beautiful their words were. "Fair enough." He pulled out his phone. "Give me your number so I can send you the address." Keisha hesitated. then rattled off the digits. His phone buzzed in her apron pocket 30 seconds later with an address in the financial district. "That's a 5-star hotel restaurant," she said, staring at the message. "I don't have clothes for—" "Wear exactly what you're wearing now." His voice was firm. "I want you, Keisha, not some dressed-up version you think I expect." The way he said her name, like it was sacred, made her chest ache. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "Probably." He stood, leaving a $100 bill under his empty mug. "But I've made calculated decisions my entire life, and they've left me empty. Maybe it's time for a beautiful mistake." He walked out before she could respond, leaving her standing in the fluorescent light, holding $100 and a hope she couldn't quite kill. Because Hayes Thornton looked at her like she mattered, and Keisha Washington hadn't mattered to anyone in a very long time. But she had no idea that across town, in a glass tower that bore his name, Hayes was making a phone call that would change everything. "Cancel my morning meetings," he told his assistant. "All of them. And Marcus, I need you to run a background check. Full workup. Everything." He gave Keisha's name, hating himself even as he did it, because he'd meant every word he said to her. But Hayes Thornton hadn't survived in the cutthroat world of high finance by trusting beautiful coincidences. And something about finding Keisha felt too perfect, too fated. He needed to know if she was real or if someone had planted her in his path. Either way, tomorrow morning would reveal the truth. He just prayed it wouldn't destroy the first real thing he'd felt in 15 years. Hayes Thornton stared at the background check on his desk at 6:30 in the morning and felt his carefully constructed world tilt on its axis. Keisha Marie Washington, age 24. No criminal record, no debt beyond a small student loan for her sister's community college tuition that she'd been paying off religiously for 2 years. 3 jobs: Rosie's diner night shift, weekend housekeeping at Mercy General Hospital, and Tuesday, Thursday mornings at a dry cleaner. Her mother had died of cancer 6 years ago, leaving behind $47,000 in medical bills that Keisha had paid off completely 18 months ago. Her sister Maya was studying nursing. Her father had left when she was 8. She volunteered at a women's shelter on her only day off. She was real, completely, devastatingly real, and Hayes had just violated her privacy in the most fundamental way because he'd been too damaged to trust what his instincts were screaming at him. He picked up his phone to cancel breakfast, to disappear from her life before he could hurt her the way he hurt everyone who got close. Then he remembered the way she'd looked at him last night, guarded but hopeful, like she was trying not to want something she'd convinced herself she couldn't have. He knew that look. He wore it every time he looked in the mirror. Hayes Thornton had built an empire by being ruthless, but maybe it was time to be brave instead. He deleted the background check, cleared his browser history, and told himself he'd never mention it. Some sins you just had to carry. Keisha stood outside the Pinnacle Hotel at 7 a.m. in her diner uniform and felt every eye on her. The doorman looked at her like she was lost. The valets whispered to each other. A woman in a Chanel suit actually laughed as she walked past. Keisha's first instinct was to run. Her second was to text Hayes and cancel. Her third was to remember that she'd survived her mother's death, her father's abandonment, and 6 years of grinding poverty. She could survive one breakfast with a man who probably wouldn't show up anyway. Then Hayes walked out of the hotel, and every thought in her head evaporated. He wore jeans, actual jeans, faded at the knees, paired with a simple black t-shirt that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but looked beautifully, devastatingly normal. He dressed down for her. The realization made her throat tight. You came, he said, and the relief in his voice sounded genuine. You thought I wouldn't. I thought you'd come to your senses. He smiled, but something haunted lingered behind his eyes. I'm glad you didn't. I almost didn't. Honesty seemed important with him. The doorman looked at me like I was here to rob the place. Hayes's expression darkened. What's his name? Don't. She touched his arm without thinking, felt him go still under her fingers. I don't need you fighting my battles. What if I want to? Then you'd be wasting your time. She pulled her hand back. I've been looked at like that my entire life. One more doorman doesn't matter. It matters to me. The intensity in his voice made her shiver. Everything about you matters to me, and I know that sounds insane because we just met, but I can't pretend I feel anything less than completely consumed by you. Nobody had ever said anything like that to her. Nobody had ever looked at her like Hayes was looking at her now, like she was precious and powerful and worth fighting for. You're intense, she managed. I'm honest. He stepped closer. I spent 15 years lying to myself about what I wanted, who I was, what mattered. I'm done lying. So here's the truth. I want to know everything about you. I want to hear about your dreams and your fears, and what makes you laugh at 3 a.m. I want to know why you make lemon meringue pie and what your favorite color is, and what you'd do if money wasn't an obstacle. And I know I have no right to want any of that, but I'm asking anyway. Keisha felt tears burn behind her eyes. Why? Because you're kind in a world that punishes kindness. Because you're strong in ways I never learned to be. Because when you look at me, you don't see my bank account or my last name or what I can do for you. You just see me. And I haven't been just me in so long I'd forgotten what it felt like. I don't even know your last name, she pointed out. Something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or fear. Does it matter? I don't know. Does it? They stared at each other in the morning light, and Keisha felt the weight of everything unspoken between them. He was hiding something. She could feel it in the tension of his shoulders, see it in the way he wouldn't quite hold her gaze. But she was hiding things too, like the fact that she'd Googled the Pinnacle Hotel last night and nearly had a panic attack when she saw the breakfast menu prices. Like the fact that she'd cried in the shower this morning because she wanted this so badly it terrified her. Like the fact that she was falling for a man whose last name she didn't know, and that felt both reckless and inevitable. Thornton, he said finally. My last name is Thornton. The name meant nothing to her. Should it? Hayes Thornton, she repeated, testing how it sounded. That's a very fancy name. It's a very heavy name. He looked away. My family has expectations, standards, rules about who I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to want. And what do you want? You! The word hung between them like a promise and a threat. Just you. But I need you to understand what that means. My family won't accept you. My business associates will judge you. The media will tear you apart if they find out about us. Dating me means stepping into a spotlight that will examine every part of your life and find you wanting for reasons that have nothing to do with who you actually are. Sounds terrible, Keisha said. Why would anyone want that? They wouldn't. His voice went rough. Which is why I should walk away right now and let you live your life without my complications. But you're not going to. No. He met her eyes finally. Because I'm selfish and desperate, and so tired of being alone that I'm willing to drag you into my mess if you'll let me. Keisha thought about her 3 jobs and her tiny apartment and her carefully budgeted life. Thought about how she'd spent 6 years sacrificing everything for other people's needs. Thought about how she'd forgotten how to want things for herself. One condition, she said, anything. You don't fix my problems. You don't pay my bills. You don't swoop in and rescue me like I'm some damsel who can't save herself. Pride flashed in his eyes. Deal. And I don't meet your family until I'm ready. I don't care how much they pressure you. They're going to hate that. Then they can hate it. She lifted her chin. I'm not performing for anyone's approval. Hayes laughed. A real, genuine laugh that transformed his entire face. God, you're magnificent. I'm serious. I know. That's what makes it magnificent. He offered his arm. Now can I please buy you the most expensive breakfast you've ever had? And watch you try not to look impressed. I'm going to order the cheapest thing on the menu out of spite. I'm going to order one of everything and make you try it all. They walked into the hotel together, and Keisha felt every eye track their movement. The billionaire CEO in jeans, and the waitress in her uniform. She should have felt embarrassed. Should have felt out of place. Instead, she felt powerful. Because Hayes Thornton looked at her like she'd hung the moon, and maybe that was worth all the stares in the world. But as they sat down in the restaurant, Keisha's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Some guy came by asking questions about you. Said he was doing a background check. Be careful. Keisha's blood went cold. She looked up at Hayes, who was studying the menu with an expression of careful neutrality. Hayes. Her voice came out flat. Did you run a background check on me? His face went white. And in that moment, Keisha knew that everything beautiful between them had just shattered before it even began. Hayes watched the color drain from Keisha's face and knew he'd just destroyed the only real thing he'd had in 15 years. Keisha, he started, but she was already standing, her chair scraping against the marble floor, loud enough to make nearby diners turn and stare. Don't! Her voice shook with a fury, so cold it burned. Don't you dare try to explain this away! Please sit down. Let you what? Justify violating my privacy, treating me like a security risk, like I'm some kind of threat you needed to investigate. Her hands were trembling, and she shoved them into her apron pockets. How long? How long have you known everything about me, while I knew nothing about you? Hayes felt his carefully constructed walls crumbling. Last night, after I left the diner, I needed to know. You needed to know what? If I was good enough. If I had the right background. If I was safe for a Thornton to be seen with. The bitterness in her voice cut deeper than any blade. No. He stood too, desperate to make her understand. I needed to know if you were real. Real? She laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. You thought I was, what? Some kind of plant? A con artist? A gold digger who just happened to be working 3 jobs and living in a studio apartment? I thought you were too perfect. The words tumbled out raw and unfiltered. I thought someone sent you to get close to me, to find my weaknesses, to what, Hayes? Steal your precious money. Destroy your empire. She stepped closer, and he could see tears gathering in her eyes that she refused to let fall. You know what the worst part is? I actually believed you. I believed all that beautiful bullshit about seeing me, about wanting to know me, about being tired of lying. But you were lying the whole time. I wasn't lying about how I feel. You were lying about who you are. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You're not some reformed, ruthless businessman trying to be better. You're just ruthless. Period. You investigated me like I was a business deal. You violated my privacy, my sister's privacy, probably talked to my neighbors and my bosses and God knows who else. And you did it all while looking at me with those eyes and saying I mattered. Hayes felt something crack open in his chest. You do matter. That's why I deleted it. That's why I swore I'd never mention it. That's why I'm standing here feeling like the worst person alive because I hurt you. And I can't take it back. You deleted it. She stared at him. After you read every detail of my life. After you learned about my mother's medical bills and my father leaving and every humiliating struggle I've been through. You think deleting it makes it better? No. He wanted to reach for her and knew he'd lost that right. Nothing makes it better. I violated your trust before you even had a chance to give it to me. I'm sorry doesn't cover it. I know that. But I'm saying it anyway because it's all I have. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you do this if you actually cared about me? Because I'm terrified. The admission tore out of him. Because everyone who gets close to me wants something. My ex-fiancé wanted my name and my money. My business partners want my connections. My family wants me to be the perfect Thornton heir. And then you walked into my life and looked at me like I was just a man. And it was so beautiful and so terrifying that I couldn't trust it. So I did what I always do. I tried to control it. I tried to protect myself. And in doing that, I destroyed the one thing I actually wanted to protect. Keisha wiped her eyes angrily. You don't get to make this about your pain. You don't get to turn yourself into the victim here. You're right. He stepped back, giving her space. You're absolutely right. I'm the villain in this story. I'm the one who took something pure and contaminated it with my paranoia and my damage. And I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. No, you don't. She grabbed her purse. But you want to know what you do deserve. You deserve to know what it feels like to be seen as a threat instead of a person. You deserve to understand that kindness isn't weakness, and poverty isn't a character flaw, and working 3 jobs doesn't make someone less valuable than a man in a glass tower. You deserve to sit in this expensive restaurant alone and think about how you had something real and you destroyed it because you couldn't believe you were worthy of it. The words hit him like physical blows. Keisha, please. I hope it was worth it. She turned to leave, then stopped. Actually, no. I hope it wasn't. I hope you spend the rest of your life wondering what we could have been if you'd just trusted me. If you'd just been brave enough to believe that someone could want you for you, and not what you could give them. Because I did. For one beautiful, stupid moment. I actually did. She walked out of the restaurant with her head high and her shoulders back. And Hayes watched her go, knowing he'd just lost the best thing that had ever happened to him. The other diners were staring now, whispering behind their hands, probably already texting their friends about the scene they'd just witnessed. Hayes Thornton, the untouchable CEO, publicly rejected by a woman in a diner uniform. Tomorrow it would be in the gossip columns. By next week, it would be a punchline at country club brunches. He didn't care. He sat back down at the table, set for 2, and stared at the empty chair across from him. The waiter approached nervously. Sir, should I? Bring everything, Hayes said quietly. Everything she would have ordered. Everything I would have made her try. All of it, sir. I said bring it all. His voice broke. I promised her breakfast. I'm keeping that promise even if she's not here to see it. The waiter retreated, and Hayes pulled out his phone. He typed a message to Keisha. I know you won't read this. I know I don't deserve for you to. But I need you to know that investigating you was the worst thing I've ever done. And I've done a lot of terrible things. You were right about everything. I was scared and damaged and too broken to recognize something real when it was standing right in front of me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect another chance. I just need you to know that for one night and one morning, you made me believe I could be someone better than who I've become. That's more than anyone else has ever given me. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to deserve it. He hit send, knowing she'd probably block his number. The food started arriving, plate after plate of expensive breakfast items that would go cold and uneaten. Hayes sat there, surrounded by abundance, and felt more alone than he'd ever felt in his life. Because Keisha Washington had walked into his world and shown him what he was missing. And Hayes Thornton had proven exactly why he didn't deserve to have it. Keisha made it 3 blocks before the tears came, and she hated herself for crying over a man she'd known for less than 48 hours. She hated that his words had burrowed under her skin. That part of her understood his fear, even as she wanted to scream at his arrogance. That she'd actually believed for one stupid moment that someone like Hayes Thornton could see her as an equal. Her phone buzzed with his message, and she read it standing on a street corner while morning commuters rushed past her like she was invisible. The words were pretty. They were always pretty with men like him. But pretty words didn't undo violations of trust. She blocked his number and went to work at the dry cleaner, spending 4 hours pressing shirts and trying not to think about how his hands had almost touched hers across the diner counter. By the time her shift ended at noon, she'd convinced herself she was fine. She'd survived worse than one failed almost relationship with a paranoid billionaire. Then she walked outside and found Hayes Thornton sitting on the curb in his expensive jeans, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "I know you blocked my number," he said without standing. "I know you don't want to see me. I know I have no right to be here. But I need 5 minutes. And then, I swear, I'll disappear from your life forever, if that's what you want." Keisha's first instinct was to walk past him. Her second was to call the police. Her third was to acknowledge the dark circles under his eyes, and the defeated slope of his shoulders, and the fact that Hayes Thornton, a man who probably had 1,000 important places to be, had spent hours sitting on a dirty curb waiting for her. "You have 3 minutes," she said, "and I'm timing you." He stood slowly, like his body hurt. "I spent the last 6 hours doing something I should have done 15 years ago. I went to therapy, emergency session, paid the guy triple to see me immediately because I'm exactly the kind of entitled asshole who thinks money solves everything." He pulled out his phone and showed her a screenshot of an appointment confirmation. "I have another session tomorrow, and the day after that. 3 times a week for the foreseeable future, because my therapist says I have severe trust issues stemming from childhood abandonment and my mother's death, and I've been using money and power as a shield against intimacy for my entire adult life." Keisha stared at him. "You went to therapy?" "I went to therapy." He'd pocketed his phone. "And I called my lawyer. Had him draft a legal document stating that I will never, under any circumstances, investigate you or anyone connected to you ever again. If I violate this, you get $10 million and full rights to publicly destroy my reputation however you see fit." He handed her a folder. "It's binding. It's notarized. It's real." She took the folder with shaking hands. "Hayes!" "I'm not done." He held up a hand. "I also called every single person my investigator talked to. Your landlord, your boss at the hospital, your sister's college advisor, and I apologized. I told them I'd violated your privacy, that it was unacceptable, and that if they experienced any negative consequences from my actions, They should contact my lawyer for compensation. Your sister Maya has my personal number now, by the way. She called me 17 different kinds of stupid and threatened to key my car if I ever hurt you again. I like her. Despite everything, Keisha felt her lips twitch. She's protective. She should be. You deserve people who protect you. He stepped closer, and she could see the raw vulnerability in his eyes. But here's the thing I realized sitting in that therapist's office. I don't want to protect you because you're weak. I want to stand beside you because you're strong. I want to support you because you've been supporting everyone else your entire life, and maybe it's time someone supported you back. Not because you need it, but because you deserve it. That's a pretty speech, Keisha said quietly. Is it true? I don't know. The honesty in his voice surprised her. I don't know if I'm capable of being the man you deserve. I don't know if I can unlearn 15 years of emotional armor in a few therapy sessions. I don't know if my damage is fixable, or if I'm always going to be the guy who investigates people because he's too scared to trust them. But I want to try. For you. For me. For whatever this could be if I don't sabotage it. Keisha looked down at the legal document in her hands. $10 million. He'd literally put his money where his mouth was. This is insane, she whispered. Completely insane. I know. You can't just throw money at problems and expect them to disappear. I know that too. He ran a hand through his hair, but I don't know what else to do. I don't know how to prove that I'm serious about changing, except to actually change. And change takes time, and I don't know if you're willing to give me that time, but I'm asking anyway. She studied his face, the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate hope he was trying to hide. Hayes Thornton had probably never begged for anything in his life, but he was begging now. One condition, she said finally. Anything. You don't get to make grand gestures to fix things when you mess up. No more $10 million contracts, or emergency therapy sessions, or calling everyone I know to apologize. You want to be in my life. You show up. Consistently. Honestly. You do the boring, unglamorous work of actually being a decent human being. Deal. And you meet Maya. Properly. Let her interrogate you and judge you and decide if you're good enough for me. She already decided I'm not good enough for you, Hayes said. She's right. Probably. Keisha smiled despite herself. But maybe you can work your way up to barely acceptable. He laughed, a real genuine laugh that sounded like relief and hope and gratitude all mixed together. I will take barely acceptable and consider myself blessed. Don't get ahead of yourself. She tucked the folder under her arm. You're on probation. One more violation of trust. One more attempt to control or fix or manage me. And we're done. No second chances. No explanations. Just done. Understood. He held out his hand. So are we. What are we? Keisha looked at his outstretched hand and thought about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Thought about the class differences and the family drama and the inevitable media attention. Thought about how he'd already hurt her and would probably hurt her again. Then she thought about the way he'd looked at her in the diner, like she was the only person in the world. Thought about him sitting on a curb for 6 hours, waiting for 3 minutes of her time. Thought about how he'd gone to therapy and called her sister and drafted a legal document just to prove he was serious. She took his hand. We're two people who are going to take this incredibly slowly and see what happens. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid and real. Slow is good. I can do slow. Can you? She raised an eyebrow. because you seem like the type who's used to getting what he wants immediately. I am. He pulled her slightly closer. But what I want is you, and you're worth waiting for. Keisha felt her heart do something dangerous in her chest. You're still on probation. I know. And I'm still mad at you. You should be. And this might not work. Probably won't. He smiled. But I'd rather fail at something real than succeed at something empty. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and light. That's the first truly smart thing you've said. Hayes touched his cheek like she'd brand him. Does this mean I get another chance at breakfast? It means you get another chance at coffee. At the diner. At 2 a.m. when I'm working. Perfect. He squeezed her hand. I'll be there. And as Keisha walked away, she looked back once to see Hayes Thornton still standing on that street corner, watching her go with an expression of such pure hope that it made her chest ache. Maybe he'd mess this up. Maybe she would. Maybe they were too different, too damaged, too complicated. But maybe, just maybe, they'd figure it out together. Hayes Thornton showed up at Rosie's diner at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, wearing jeans and a nervous smile. And Keisha felt her heart do something dangerous when she saw him slide into his usual booth, like he belonged there. He ordered coffee, black, and when she brought it over, he said, I know I'm on probation. I know I don't deserve another chance. But I'm here. And I'll keep being here until you believe I'm serious about changing. She wanted to stay angry. Anger was safer than hope. But there was something in his eyes that made her pause. Something raw and vulnerable that she'd never seen in a man like him. One coffee, she said. That's all you get tonight. He smiled like she'd given him the world. One coffee is enough. He came back Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, always at 2 a.m., always ordering the same thing, always leaving a reasonable tip that wasn't excessive or insulting, just respectful. He never pushed for more than she was willing to give, never demanded her attention when she was busy with other customers, just sat in his booth and watched her work like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. On Saturday, Maya showed up at the diner unannounced, marched straight to Hayes's booth, and said, I need to talk to you. Outside. Now. Keisha tried to intervene, but Maya held up a hand. This is between me and the billionaire who hurt my sister. Hayes stood without hesitation. Whatever you need to say, I'll listen. They were gone for 20 minutes, and when they came back, Maya's expression was still suspicious, but slightly less murderous. He's on probation with me, too, she announced. One wrong move, and I'm keying his car. Hayes nodded solemnly. That's fair. It was the way he said it, completely serious, no hint of condescension or amusement, that made Keisha's defenses crack just a little more. 2 weeks passed, and Hayes kept showing up, kept being present, kept doing exactly what he'd promised. He told her about his therapy sessions, about the childhood wounds he was finally addressing, about how his mother's death had made him afraid to trust anyone because everyone he loved eventually left. I'm not making excuses, he said one night, when the diner was empty except for them. I'm just trying to help you understand why I am the way I am, why I sabotage good things before they can hurt me. Keisha refilled his coffee. Understanding doesn't erase what you did. I know. He wrapped his hands around the mug. But maybe it's a starting point. On the 15th day, Hayes' father showed up at the diner at 5 a.m., just as Keisha's shift was ending. Richard Thornton looked around the worn booths and faded linoleum with barely concealed disgust, then fixed his cold eyes on his son. We need to talk. About your future. About this. He gestured vaguely at Keisha. Situation. Hayes stood up slowly. Her name is Keisha, And she's not a situation. She's a distraction. Richard's voice was ice. You have responsibilities, a company to run, a legacy to uphold. You can't throw all of that away for some waitress you've known for 2 weeks. Keisha felt the familiar shame rising, the sense that she was somehow less than, somehow not enough. But before she could say anything, Hayes stepped between her and his father. Don't. His voice was quiet, but lethal. Don't you dare reduce her to her job or her bank account or anything else that doesn't matter. Keisha is the most genuine, strongest, most remarkable person I've ever met. And if you can't see that, then you're the one with the problem, not her. Richard's face hardened. If you continue this relationship, there will be consequences. The board is already questioning your judgment. Your engagement to Victoria was supposed to solidify our merger with Ashford Industries. Breaking that off cost us millions. And now you're parading around with the woman I love, Hayes interrupted. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Keisha's breath caught because he'd never said it before. Not directly, not like that. Hayes turned to face her, and his eyes were blazing with something fierce and terrifying and beautiful. I love you, he said, like his father wasn't even there. I love you, and I'm sorry it took me this long to say it. I'm sorry I investigated you and violated your trust and made you feel like you weren't enough exactly as you are. I'm sorry I'm damaged and difficult and probably going to mess this up 100 more times. But I love you, Keisha Washington, and I'm choosing you over everything else. Richard made a sound of disgust. Then you're choosing poverty, obscurity, failure. Because if you walk away from Thornton Industries for her, you're out. No severance, no trust fund, no family support. You'll have nothing. Hayes didn't even blink. I'll have her. That's not nothing. You're a fool. Maybe. Hayes smiled, and it was the freest expression Keisha had ever seen on his face. But I'd rather be a fool in love than a success story who's dead inside. Richard turned to Keisha with venom in his eyes. This is your fault. You've manipulated my son. Stop! Keisha's voice cut through the diner like a blade. She stepped forward, shoulders back, chin high, channeling every ounce of strength she'd built. Surviving 3 jobs and raising a sister and refusing to be broken by a world that told her she didn't matter. I didn't manipulate anyone. I didn't chase your son or scheme to trap him or do any of the things you're implying. He came to me. He pursued me. And yeah, maybe I'm just a waitress with student debt and a tiny apartment, but I know my worth. I know I deserve to be chosen, to be loved, to be respected. And if you can't see that your son is brave enough to choose authenticity over approval, then you don't deserve him. The silence that followed was electric. Then Hayes took her hand, laced his fingers through hers, and said to his father, "We're done here. Don't contact me again unless you're ready to apologize to her." They walked out of the diner together into the pale morning light, and Keisha was shaking so hard she could barely stand. Hayes pulled her into his arms, and she felt him trembling too, felt the magnitude of what he'd just done settling over both of them like snow. You just gave up everything, she whispered against his chest. No, he said. I just chose what actually matters. She pulled back to look at him. What if you regret it? What if you wake up tomorrow and realize you threw away your entire life for someone you barely know? I know you, he said fiercely. Maybe not all the details. Maybe not your favorite color, or your middle name, or what you wanted to be when you were 7. But I know your heart. I know your strength. I know that you make me want to be better than I am. And that's enough. Keisha felt tears streaming down her face. I love you too. I didn't want to. and I tried not to, but I do. I love you, Hayes Thornton, even though you're complicated and damaged, and this is probably going to be the hardest thing either of us has ever done." He kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of promise, and Keisha felt like she was standing at the edge of something terrifying and beautiful. They didn't know what came next. Didn't know how Hayes would support himself without his family's money. Didn't know if his father would ever forgive him. Didn't know if love was really enough to overcome all the obstacles in their path. But they knew this. They were choosing each other, consciously, deliberately, despite everything. And sometimes, that's where the real love story begins. Hayes Thornton moved into a studio apartment in Keisha's neighborhood 3 days after his father disowned him, and the reality of what he'd given up hit him like a freight train when he realized the entire space was smaller than his old walk-in closet. He had one suitcase of clothes, a laptop, his car that he'd have to sell soon because he couldn't afford the insurance, and exactly $47,000 in a personal account his father couldn't touch, which sounded like a lot until he did the math on rent and food and realized it would last maybe 6 months if he was careful. Keisha came over on the first night with Maya, both of them carrying grocery bags and wearing expressions that were equal parts concerned and impressed. "So this is rock bottom for a billionaire," Maya said, looking around the bare walls and single window. "Could be worse. At least you have a window." Hayes laughed, and it felt good. Felt real in a way nothing in his old life ever had. "I'm calling it minimalist chic." "You're calling it denial," Keisha said, but her eyes were soft. She started unpacking groceries, basics like bread and peanut butter and instant ramen, and Hayes felt something crack open in his chest because she was taking care of him, even though he'd hurt her, even though he'd proven he didn't deserve it. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not giving up on me." She met his eyes. "I'm not saying this is going to be easy. I'm not saying I'm not still scared you'll wake up one day and resent me for everything you lost. But I believe people can change if they want it badly enough. So prove me right." He spent the next week applying for jobs, and the rejection was brutal and humbling in ways he'd never experienced. His resume was impressive on paper. Harvard MBA, CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. But the gap between his last position and now raised questions he couldn't answer honestly without sounding insane. "So you voluntarily left Thornton Industries to pursue—" "What exactly?" interviewers would ask, and Hayes would fumble through explanations about wanting a fresh start, about reassessing his priorities, about seeking meaningful work, and he could see in their eyes that they thought he was either lying or having a breakdown. After 2 weeks of rejections, Marcus Chen showed up at his apartment unannounced. Hayes's former CFO and closest friend stood in the doorway holding a briefcase and wearing an expression that was hard to read. "Can I come in?" Marcus asked. Hayes stepped aside, suddenly aware of how pathetic his new life must look to someone who still had everything. Marcus sat on the only chair, a folding metal thing Hayes had bought at a thrift store, and opened his briefcase. "The board is a mess without you. Your father is running the company into the ground, making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones. We've lost 3 major clients in 2 weeks." Hayes felt a pang of something, not quite regret, but grief for something that had been his entire identity. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I can't come back. Not under those conditions." "I know." Marcus pulled out a folder. "That's why I'm here with a different proposal. 6 of us, senior executives who believe in your vision, are leaving Thornton Industries to start our own consulting firm. We want you to lead it. Equal partnership, democratic decision-making, none of the dynasty politics. We have enough capital to get started, enough clients willing to follow us. and enough belief in what we can build together. Hayes stared at the folder like it might explode. Why would you risk everything for me? I walked away. I chose a woman over the company. No, Marcus corrected. You chose integrity over corruption. You chose authenticity over performance. And honestly, watching you do that was the wake-up call a lot of us needed. We've been selling our souls for paychecks and prestige. And for what? So we can die rich and empty like your father. The offer was everything Hayes had lost and more. A chance to rebuild on his own terms, to prove he could succeed without his family name, to create something meaningful with people who actually respected him. But there was a catch. We need to be operational in 3 months, Marcus said, which means 80-hour weeks, constant travel, barely any personal time while we're getting established. I know you have other priorities now. A relationship. I need to know you can commit. Hayes thought about Keisha, about the fragile trust they were rebuilding, about how she'd already sacrificed so much just believing in him. I need to talk to her first. I can't make this decision without her. Marcus nodded. That's exactly why we want you leading this. The old Hayes would have said yes without consulting anyone. That night, Hayes laid it all out for Keisha in her tiny living room, while Maya pretended not to eavesdrop from the kitchen. He explained the opportunity, the demands, the potential, and the risk that he'd become the kind of absent workaholic she deserved better than. What do you want to do? Keisha asked when he finished. I want to build something I'm proud of, he admitted, but not at the cost of losing you. Not again. She was quiet for a long moment, and Hayes felt his future hanging in the balance. Then she said, Take the job. Build your company. Chase your dream. But let me finish. She took his hands. Take the job, but promise me 3 things. 1, you go back to therapy and you stay in therapy. Because success without mental health is just a different kind of prison. 2, we have 1 night a week that's sacred. No work, no phones, just us. 3, you communicate. When you're overwhelmed, when you're scared, when you're struggling, you tell me instead of shutting me out. Hayes felt tears burning behind his eyes. You're really okay with this? With me working crazy hours while we're still figuring us out? I'm okay with you being who you're meant to be, she said. I didn't fall in love with a man who needed to be small to make me comfortable. I fell in love with someone brilliant and driven who also happens to be learning how to be human. So go be brilliant. I'll be here. Maya appeared in the doorway. Also, for the record, if you screw this up, I'm not just keying your car. I'm slashing all 4 tires and posting the video on TikTok. Hayes laughed through his tears. Noted. He called Marcus that night and accepted the position. And 3 months later, Thornton Consulting Group, renamed Phoenix Strategic Partners to symbolize rising from the ashes, opened its doors with 6 partners, 12 employees, and enough momentum to make Richard Thornton realize his son hadn't needed the family name to succeed. Hayes worked brutal hours, but he kept his promises. Therapy every Tuesday, date night every Friday, communication even when it was hard. And slowly, impossibly, he and Keisha built something real. Not a fairy tale, but something better. Something earned. On their 6-month anniversary, Hayes took Keisha to the rooftop of his old building, the place where he'd first realized he was falling for her. In the city spread out below them like a galaxy of possibilities. I have something for you, he said, pulling out a small box. Keisha's eyes went wide. Hayes, if that's a ring, I swear. It's not a ring. He opened the box to reveal a key. It's a key to my apartment. I know we're not ready to live together yet, But I want you to have access. I want you to know that my space is your space, that you're not just visiting my life. You're part of it. She took the key with shaking hands. This is the most romantic non-proposal I've ever received. Give me time, he said, grinning. I'm working up to the proposal. She kissed him then, and Hayes thought about how far they'd both come. From a chance encounter in a diner to this moment of choosing each other every single day. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And that made it worth everything. Phoenix Strategic Partners was thriving 8 months in, landing contracts with Fortune 500 companies, and earning industry recognition that made Hayes' father's dismissal look increasingly foolish. But success came with a price that Keisha started paying in lonely Friday nights, when Hayes texted, "Emergency client meeting. Can't make date night," for the 3rd week in a row. She told herself she understood. Told herself this was temporary. Told herself that building a company from scratch required sacrifices. But understanding didn't make her apartment feel less empty or her heart feel less neglected. Maya noticed first. "He's doing it again," she said over coffee on a Sunday morning when Hayes had canceled brunch to fly to Singapore for a pitch meeting. "Doing what?" Keisha asked, even though she knew. "Choosing work over you. Different reasons. Same result." Keisha wanted to defend him, wanted to explain that this was different because Hayes was building something meaningful instead of hiding behind corporate armor. But the words felt hollow, because Maya was right. She was alone again, just in a different way. The breaking point came on Keisha's birthday. Hayes had promised, sworn on everything he held sacred, that he'd be there for her small celebration at the diner after her shift. She'd invited Maya, a few co-workers, nothing fancy, just the people who mattered most. She waited until midnight, watching her phone, watching the door, watching her sister's face grow progressively more murderous as the hours ticked by. Hayes finally called at 12:47 a.m., his voice rough with exhaustion and guilt. "Keisha, I'm so sorry." The Tokyo deal fell apart, and I had to stay on calls trying to salvage it. I know I promised. I know this is unforgivable. But I couldn't let 6 months of work implode because of me, she finished quietly. Because you had to choose between your company and my birthday, and the company won. That's not fair. This deal represents 40 jobs, millions in revenue, the entire future of... I know. She felt numb, like she was watching this conversation happen to someone else. I know it's important. I know it matters. But Hayes, I matter too, and lately, I don't feel like I do. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, you matter more than anything. You know that. Do I? Because your actions are telling a different story. She hung up before he could respond. Before she could hear the excuses, or the promises, or the pain in his voice that would make her forgive him, before anything actually changed. Hayes showed up at her apartment at 6 a.m., still in his suit from the day before, looking like he hadn't slept. Keisha opened the door because Maya was at her boyfriend's place, and she didn't have the energy to pretend she was strong enough to keep him out. I messed up, he said. I broke my promise and I hurt you, and there's no excuse. You're right. There isn't. She crossed her arms, armor against the way her heart wanted to forgive him just for showing up. But here's what scares me, Hayes. This is the pattern. You get consumed by work. You disappear into your own head. You forget that relationships require actual presence, not just good intentions. And I can't do this again. I can't be the person who's always understanding, always flexible, always waiting for you to remember I exist. Then don't. He stepped closer, and she could see the desperation in his eyes. Don't be understanding. Don't be flexible. Call me out every single time I start slipping. Get angry. Demand better. Because you're right. I'm falling into old patterns. And I need you to be the person who won't let me. That's not my job! The words exploded out of her. It's not my job to manage your work-life balance or remind you to show up for your own relationship. I'm not your therapist or your assistant or your mother. I'm supposed to be your partner, but I can't partner with someone who's never actually here. Hayes flinched like she'd slapped him. What do you want me to do? Walk away from the company? Let down everyone who believed in me? I want you to figure out how to be successful and present. I want you to stop treating our relationship like it's the thing you'll get to once everything else is handled. Because there's always going to be another deal, another crisis, another reason to put me second. She felt tears streaming down her face. I want you to want me enough to actually change, not just promise to change. I do want you. God, Keisha, you're the only thing that makes any of this matter. Then prove it. She wiped her eyes. Not with words, not with apologies, with actual, consistent, sustained action over time. Because I love you, Hayes. But I won't sacrifice my self-respect to be with someone who can't prioritize me even on my birthday. He looked shattered, and part of her wanted to take it back. Wanted to say she was overreacting, wanted to be the cool girl who didn't need attention or consistency or follow-through. But she'd spent too many years making herself small for other people's comfort, and she was done. I'm going to fix this, Hayes said. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to figure it out. Maybe. She opened the door, a clear dismissal, but I need space while you do. I need time to figure out if I can actually trust you to keep showing up, or if this is just who you are, and I need to accept it or walk away. Keisha! Please go. Her voice broke. Just go. He left, and she collapsed on her couch and cried until she had nothing left. The next week was torture. Hayes respected her request for space. But he sent flowers to the diner every day with notes that said things like, Day 1 of proving I can change, and hired a COO to handle operations so I can focus on strategy and life, and in therapy twice a week now, because you deserve someone who's doing the work. Maya was skeptical. Flowers are easy. Let's see if he actually follows through. But on day 8, something shifted. Hayes showed up at the diner at 2 a.m., their original time, and slid into his usual booth. When Keisha brought him coffee, he said, I'm not here to pressure you or ask for forgiveness. I'm just here because this is where we started, and I want you to see that I remember what matters. She wanted to stay guarded, but there was something different about him, a quietness, a groundedness that hadn't been there before. What changed? She asked. I talked to my therapist about why I keep self-sabotaging. Turns out, I'm terrified that if I'm not constantly achieving, constantly proving my worth through work, you'll realize I'm not actually that special and leave. He smiled sadly. So I was leaving first, in a way. Choosing work before you could choose to leave me. Keisha sat down across from him. Rules about fraternizing with customers be damned. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I know. You're special because of who you are, not what you accomplish. And the fact that you can't see that breaks my heart. I'm learning. He reached across the table, and she let him take her hand. I hired a COO. I set hard boundaries with clients. I blocked off every Friday night and Sunday morning as non-negotiable personal time. I'm seeing my therapist twice a week, and I joined a support group for workaholics, which is apparently a real thing. Hayes, I'm not asking you to take me back right now. I'm asking you to let me show you, over time, that I can be the partner you deserve. No more broken promises, no more choosing work over us. Just consistent, sustained action until you believe me again. Keisha felt hope and fear warring in her chest. And if you slip, if the old patterns come back, then you call me out, and I course correct immediately. And if I can't, if I prove I'm incapable of change, then you walk away knowing you gave me every chance, and I failed to rise to the occasion. She studied his face, looking for the cracks, the excuses, the escape routes. But all she saw was a man who was finally, genuinely trying to be better. "One more chance," she said. "But Hayes, this is it. There's no fourth act where I forgive you again. This is the moment where you either become the man you keep promising to be, or we end this for good. I understand." He squeezed her hand. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Thank me in 6 months if you've actually kept your promises." He smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd finally figured out what he was fighting for. Deal. 6 months later, Hayes Thornton kept every single promise he'd made to Keisha Williams, showing up for Friday date nights, even when Singapore clients begged for emergency calls, leaving his phone in the car during their sacred Sunday brunches, and learning that being present meant actually listening, instead of mentally drafting emails while she talked about her day. Phoenix Strategic Partners flourished under the new structure, with Marcus handling day-to-day operations, while Hayes focused on high-level strategy, which meant he worked smarter instead of longer. And for the first time in his life, he understood that success without someone to share it with was just expensive loneliness. Keisha watched him transform from the man who'd forgotten her birthday into someone who remembered she liked her coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of cream, who noticed when she was tired and drew her a bath without being asked, who showed up at the diner at 2 a.m., not because he was obligated, but because he genuinely wanted to see her smile. Maya remained skeptical for the first 3 months, watching Hayes like a hawk for signs of backsliding. But even she had to admit he was doing the work when he voluntarily skipped a major industry conference to attend Keisha's community college graduation ceremony, where she finally earned her associate degree in business management. "I'm impressed," Maya told him after the ceremony, while Keisha was taking photos with classmates. "You've actually changed. I didn't think rich boys were capable of that." Hayes laughed. "Your faith in me is touching." "Don't get cocky. You're still on probation for life as far as I'm concerned." But her smile was genuine, and Hayes felt like he'd finally earned something that mattered more than any business deal. The approval of the person who loved Keisha most. Everything was perfect, almost suspiciously perfect. Until Richard Thornton showed up at Phoenix Strategic Partners on a Tuesday afternoon in March, looking older and smaller than Hayes remembered. His father's assistant had called ahead requesting a meeting, and Hayes had almost refused, until Marcus pointed out that closure might be worth the discomfort. They met in Hayes's office, which was modest compared to his old corner suite, but felt more honest, more earned. Richard looked around with an expression Hayes couldn't quite read. "You've done well for yourself," his father said finally. "Better than I expected without the family name." Was that a compliment or an insult? Hayes asked, keeping his voice neutral. Both, probably. Richard sat down without being invited, and Hayes noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "I'm dying, Hayes. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. 6 months. Maybe less." The words hit like a physical blow, and Hayes felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Grief for the father he'd wanted, anger at the father he'd gotten, and a strange, unexpected sadness for all the years they'd wasted on power games instead of connection. "I'm sorry," Hayes said, and meant it. "I didn't come here for sympathy." Richard pulled out a folder, and Hayes felt déjà vu remembering the last time his father had presented him with documents that changed everything. I came to offer you Thornton Industries. Full control, no strings, no conditions. The board wants you back. The company needs you back, and frankly, I need to know my life's work won't crumble the moment I'm gone. Hayes stared at the folder like it was a snake. Why now? Why after everything? Because I was wrong. The admission seemed to cost Richard something. I thought I was teaching you strength by making you choose between love and legacy. But all I did was teach you that I valued power over people. You walked away and built something better, something that doesn't require sacrificing your humanity. That's the kind of leader Thornton Industries needs. It was everything Hayes had once wanted. Vindication, reconciliation, the empire he'd been groomed to inherit. But as he looked at the folder, all he could think about was Keisha's face when he'd missed her birthday, the way she'd looked at him with disappointment that cut deeper than any business failure. I need time to think about it, Hayes said, and I need to talk to Keisha. Richard's expression hardened slightly. You're still going to let a woman dictate your career decisions? No, Hayes corrected. I'm going to include my partner in a choice that affects both our futures. That's what people who actually love each other do. His father left without another word, and Hayes sat alone in his office, feeling like the universe was testing him one final time. That night, he laid it all out for Keisha in her apartment while Maya listened from the kitchen, not even pretending to give them privacy. He explained his father's diagnosis, the offer, the magnitude of what he was being asked to choose. Thornton Industries is 10 times the size of Phoenix, he said. It's global reach, unlimited resources, the chance to shape entire industries. But it's also New York headquarters, constant travel, board politics, and the kind of pressure that destroyed my father's health and every relationship he ever had. Keisha was quiet for a long moment, and Hayes felt his future hanging in the balance again. What do you want to do? She asked finally. Honestly, I want to tell him no. I want to keep building Phoenix with people I trust. Keep living in a city where I can see you every day. Keep proving that success doesn't require selling your soul. He took her hands. But I also don't want you to resent me later for turning down an opportunity this big. I don't want you to wonder if I made myself smaller to keep you comfortable. That's not what this is, she said firmly. This is you knowing who you are and what you value. But Hayes, if you want to take it, if this is your dream, then take it. We'll figure out the rest. It's not my dream anymore. He pulled her close. You are. This life we're building is. And I'm not going to sacrifice that for my father's legacy or anyone's expectations of what success should look like. Maya appeared in the doorway. So you're really turning down $1 billion company for my sister? I'm choosing the life I want instead of the life I was told to want, Hayes corrected. There's a difference. He called his father the next morning and declined the offer, recommending Marcus instead as someone who had the skills without the emotional baggage. Richard took the news with surprising grace, and in their final conversation before he entered hospice, he told Hayes something that sounded almost like pride. You're stronger than I ever was. 3 weeks later, Hayes took Keisha back to the rooftop where he'd given her the key to his apartment. And this time, the box he pulled out held a ring. I know we've been through hell, he said, getting down on one knee while the city sparkled below them like a promise. I know I've messed up more times than I can count. But you've made me better, made me braver, made me the kind of man who knows that the greatest success is being chosen by someone who sees all your flaws and loves you anyway. Keisha Williams, Will you marry me? She looked at the ring. Simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious diamonds his mother used to wear. And then at his face, and Hayes saw his entire future in her eyes. Yes, she said, and kissed him while Maya cheered from somewhere behind them, because of course she'd been hiding on the rooftop the whole time. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the diner where they'd met, surrounded by the people who'd watched them fall apart and come back together stronger. Marcus was best man, Maya was maid of honor, and Richard Thornton watched via video call from hospice, tears streaming down his face as he witnessed his son choose love over legacy and somehow end up with both. As Hayes kissed his bride and the small crowd erupted in applause, he thought about how far they'd both come, from a chance encounter at 2 a.m. to this moment of choosing each other in front of everyone who mattered. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. And 3 months later, when Keisha told him she was pregnant and everything they'd built was about to change again in ways they couldn't predict, Hayes realized their story was just beginning.